Finisher can be used in a lot of different ways. Create dynamic transitions right on your master track. Instantly create breakdowns with the turn of a knob. Get weird with it. Make more targeted upgrades to your sound, like making a lead more epic. Don't tell anybody I have 2 finishers on that sound. Beef up your drums. Or even find the right guitar tone. Finisher was created to give you access to carefully crafted advanced sound design with a simplified approach where you can often get transformative results by just turning a single knob. Let's walk through the different Finisher titles, talk about what makes them special, and how you might use them in your productions. For the purposes of this video, I created a few different short little demos in a few different genres so I can showcase the different titles of Finisher. The first one I bring up here is Neo, because Neo is like an all-around Finisher title where if we look at the presets, you can see that there's a number of different types of sounds we can get. Crushed for the more bit crushed kinds of sounds, spread for more spacey kinds of sounds, and a few other categories here as well. But let me just showcase this for you on the drums of this beat. I'll solo these drums, and let's just take a look at the Finisher interface. Across all of the different titles, you're gonna have a big knob in the middle. Don't mistake this for a dry wet knob. It can kind of feel like that at first, but what's actually happening is this single knob in the middle of each finisher is twisting and turning different parameters behind the scenes in Finisher so that you don't have to do all kinds of crazy routing and modulation and sound design and things like that. So if you want to get the most out of your effect, crank that mix knob in the middle. And you can hear that has a pretty cool effect on these drums. I like to dial it in a little subtly here. And then on the left and the right, you're going to see different vary controls. These can change from preset to preset, from title to title. Here in this preset, we have access to a comb filter. So let me just crank up the mix. A lot of fun to play with. A character knob. Deterioration. And a highlighter. So you can see each one of those vary knobs, in addition to the overall mix knob in the middle, gets you quick results and a unique sound with just a simplified interface here. I also want to point out that we're always going to have an input level here if you want to adjust the sound going into the plugin, and then we'll have an output on the other side if you need to make adjustments for the sound that actually comes out of the plugin. I alluded to this earlier, but we'll have access to presets at the top. This goes across for all titles. We'll also have access to modes, which is sort of a different category of sound selection across the different titles. We'll get into that later. And then you'll see notes here, which can be actually pretty helpful when you start scanning through different presets. You can see that this one is noted as a hyper distorted filter with screaming feedback. Bonus fuzz stage on Vary 1. So let's crank up that bonus fuzz stage. So these are from the Crush presets. We're getting really distorted sounds on the drums, which actually sound pretty cool in the mix. But let me jump over to the lead sound. I talked about this sound a little bit in the intro, and it's got 2 Neos on it. So the first Neo here is also a brutal screamer. It's a distortion. Let me turn that on. But I also wanted to add a bit of floatiness to this sound, so I used another instance of Neo to add a clouds preset, which is more of a spacey, floaty ambience. Let me quickly play for you the before. So originally, this melody sounded like this. Kind of boring, just filtered lead. Add a little bit of that brutal screamer from Neo. Maybe a little more. And then additionally, the clouds preset from another instance of Neo. Suddenly, this sits a lot better in our mix and just sounds a bit more epic. Also pointing out that if you take a look at the vari knobs here on this clouds preset, we have a different set of vari knobs we can change, with clouds being a more spatial ambient effect. We get a cave character vari knob, an ambience character vari knob, and a highlighter. But you can always expect some kind of control that's specific to the type of effect that you're applying. We've got a lot of other finisher titles to get to, but just know that Neo is your overall title. There's a lot of different kinds of effects in Neo. A couple other titles are built with some specific purpose, so let me talk to you about Retro really quick on this upbeat hip-hop track. I've actually got it on the vocal for this track. So again, similar to what we were just doing, if I turn off the finisher here, kind of a dry-ish, if I play it in the mix, kind of, I don't know, it needs a little something. So pull up Finisher Retro, and in Retro, we have presets that are around different characters like filter, distortion, age, like the kind of effect you'll be getting. But in modes, we're categorized by time or decade, where we'll get different vintage nostalgic effects based on the technology of a specific decade. This particular preset that I have on here, let me play it for you, is an interesting early digital delay sound from the 80s, which I think sounds really cool. And you can see here in the vari knobs, I have access over like the different kind of pattern to make it super short. Or for this purpose of this song, I had a bit of a longer pattern selected. And we can crush these bits too. Crank up the feedback, and start to get a really gritty, crunchy sound here on Retro. As you can imagine, Retro can be a lot of fun to also put on drums. So I showcased this preset in the intro, but if you just listen to this and if you look at the notes, it says an old circuit design from the pre-chorus era, but with a modern twist stereo. So that's a little funny, and sometimes these notes can be a little quirky and funny. But if you listen to this, it's not just about an analog warmth. We're also getting really interesting pitch stuff happening here too, which I can adjust with tune spread. Do I want to push towards the high-end frequencies with color, or do I want to keep it dark? But I really like that. Let's do a little before and after. Crank that down. Just a stock drum loop. Dial this in a bit. Suddenly, it's just like a little more interesting, and that's the name of the game with Finisher. You have your tracks, they're sounding good, they're sounding okay, but if you want to take them to the next level, whether it's individual sounds or full tracks, you can do that with Finisher. Just add a little more character to your sounds, or a lot. And it's not just about like circuit emulation or cassette emulation like a lot of retro style plugins are. Let's go into the 1980s and find some of these reverb presets. I think that sounds really good, even dialed in at about 14. Let's hear it, Reverb 89. Let's get a little brighter color here. And then, of course, if you do want that kind of tape sound, I'm going to click on this 4-track recorder mode. And we get that slightly compressed, kind of like overdriven sound of a tape machine. Crank up the wear. So I point out those different style effects, the one we started with where we're getting that cool pitch stuff happening, those reverbs, and then this 4-track recorder mode, because you can see that there's a variety of types of effects when it comes to especially vintage or retro modeling. It's not just all about degradation of the sound, it's about the technology of the time and how that shaped certain aspects, like how reverb was actually achieved in the 80s. And another thing I want to point out before we jump off retro, we've got both presets And we've got modes. The way presets are organized is by the type of effect that's happening here in retro, whether it's distortion, whether we want to age the sound a bit more, modulate it. Whereas the modes are organized by decade, like I pointed out before. So you have a couple ways of finding the different sounds you're looking for. Presets might be like a little more crafted effects, but whereas if you go into the modes, you're going to get things that are, designed to sound like a 4-track recorder. Like that's a very clear idea there. So you can bounce between presets and modes to find the sound that you want. So retro is a title that's very much purpose built for those vintage kind of sounds, whether that's degradation or space, anything from the retro world. Okay, next up, DYNAMO. DYNAMO also has a bit of a time-based aspect. Let's hear what it sounds like on some drums. This is the Breathe Machine preset. And DYNAMO is unique because we've got this pattern knob here, which is going to change, the result of the timing of what we're hearing. Let me set it back to poly. I think of this as a kind of performance effect that works especially well on drums as well. Jumping over to another preset, Busy Bites. Perfect to just create some kind of breakdown or build up. Instantly, again, a ton of sound design happening here that you don't have to worry about. Just turn a single knob. That's it. I mean, I get instant ideas just turning some of these finisher knobs. One more DYNAMO preset here on these drums. Just really awesome. I mean, it's all staying in time. We're getting those reverses. And then the notes say use vary 2 and 3 sparingly for extra events. We're getting those reverses. And we've also got tone on 4. We can crank up rearrange to get really crazy. I want to get more of a dark sound. Let's do that. Let's pull back on rearrange and reverse. A perfectly usable like beat chopper, beat stutter here. That's the occasionally bold preset. And I gotta do it. Let's copy that same effect and throw it on the random vocal. And let's just hear the chop on the vocal.
You make me, baby, making me feel nice. Love that I really want to make it mine.
Instant, like hypnotic craziness. I could sample that in a minute. But that's DYNAMO on some individual sounds. I think it really shines when you start putting it on a full track. Here on this chill house vibe we've got going, I've got a couple DYNAMOs. This is the DJ pattern finisher. Just really instant, like transition kind of sounds. Or if you just leave it cranked, listen to this. You basically build a whole bridge or a whole breakdown of your song around just this that's happening. Just taking your already made music and transforming it into something new, but not something just randomly new, something actually cool. And that concept follows us to the other preset that I wanted to show, which is Daft Breakdown. Let's see if y'all recognize this kind of sound. The scary part of using these finishers is when I crank the finisher back down, I kind of miss the sound of the finisher affected thing. I don't want to go back to normal. Let's start with boost. I've put it on the master of this full beat here, and I'm going to use it to create a cool transition effect by turning up the finisher knob. So that's a lot of fun. But a special thing about Boost is even though I was in manual mode, turning that knob manually, I can actually set this using this first vary knob here to be in time with my track. So if I set the finisher to the highest point that I want it to reach, I can set it to essentially get to that point in a certain amount of time. So I've got it set to 2 bars here. So let's watch that cycle happen over 2 bars. 2, 2. So essentially that time aspect is automated. And of course you can set that to 4 or 8 bars as well. If you set it to 8 bars and you just let this run, that actually will be probably perfect for a lot of songs. You don't have the effects happening too soon or too often. They'll just happen every 8 bars. Here we go. It's coming up. Furthermore, and I'm just going to bring this down actually to 2 bars so we don't have to listen 8 bars every time we want to demo it, but I've got this beat knob here, which lets you set where the drop lands. So currently the drop always lands on the downbeat, the first beat of 1. If I just crank that up to bar 2, beat 3, if you're a little confused, stick with me, I'm going to count it out for you. But what will happen is this finisher, this transition effect will build up all the way to bar 2, beat 3, and then come back down. Let's listen to that and just count it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3. Hear how that finisher effect cut out once we got to beat 3 of bar 2. So that gives you a lot of control. You don't just have to drop on the downbeat every time. You can go bar 2, beat 4, for instance. Let's try that. 2, 2, 3. So a lot of songs actually have that. They've displaced where the drop is or where we build up to. Really cool that we have control over that in Boost here. Another cool aspect of the timing is that we were currently going clockwise, but we can set this to be counterclockwise as well. So instead of building up to the effect fades down. And of course, we've talked about all of these timing effects, but don't forget, earlier we were just controlling this manually. So you can totally just go ahead and put it in manual mode and use it as a performance effect in that way as well. So as we spoke about before with presets and modes, if we go to presets, we're going to have a lot of categories of the type of sound we'll be creating here: risers, up sweeps, impacts, and down sweeps. If we look at modes, we're going to have sounds organized by what you might put into it. So this effect that we're on right now is a track mode, aka I'm putting it on my whole track. But let's experiment and let's hear a couple other effects. Try this on. An epic sweep here. What's cool is like if you create risers with Boost, you're using the sound from your actual beat to create the riser. You're not just using the same riser sample that everybody else uses. So that's something to think about. Let's try another preset, the try this on tracks. So this one is like a tape stop effect, or a tape start effect if you want to play it in reverse. We go from creating risers, creating these cool time-based delay effects, to doing a tape stop. It's a lot in a single title. But let's go ahead and try to bring Boost over to that dry vocal that we had before. I've just copied that. I'll paste it on. Reminder what this sounds like. Of course, that's the tape stop function, but let's experiment with a couple other presets. And I'm actually going to search by mode and search some of these vocal modes. Pitch to glitter. Let's see what happens here. Let's try buffer delays. Wow, that would be cool to build up to a drop. Looped verb. Let's hear this one. These are like instant drop makers, I feel. Go one more. Echo let scratch. It's a lot of sound to consider. We've just put a single effect onto a basically dry vocal. So Boost is very versatile if you're creating transitions or drops. You've got these time-based effects that are really cool to put on a variety of different sounds. Jumping to another demo here. It's kind of upbeat hip-hop thing. Now, I want to introduce you to FLUXX, which is sort of the mad scientist brother to Neo, where there's a lot of different kinds of effects here. You can see that there's effect presets for chords, arpeggios, rhythmic, and solo instruments, but these effects are going to get crazy. Now, we were just talking about putting finisher on individual elements, but let's hear what it sounds like when we put it on the full track. Like an instant breakdown maker. Just so quickly, the ability to get an effect like that, which would take you tons of time with automating if you just used simple devices like filters and delays. Finisher's got it for you in one package here. You can also change the timing of the delay on this particular preset. But we're going to come back to this idea of using finisher on overall tracks because that can be a lot of fun, in addition to using it on individual parts. If I jump to another beat here, this is kind of a weird, dreamy beat, right? If I open up the drums, I've got FLUXX here. Let's solo it. Open up FLUXX. This is already kind of an interesting, weird drum loop, but we've got an effect called fragmenter, which can almost be used like a performance effect. It does a great job of like randomizing individual steps in the drum loop. And then you always have control over the finisher knob to get that timing just right. It's really fun to perform with. Even if I just left it on a little bit, left all those shuffles in there, that sounds pretty cool too. Here, we've got access to a randomizer, where the randomizer is going to give us a little bit of control over timing here in this preset. Let's crank that up. Let's see what we got. And then we've got things like the resonance and the shape. Usually there's some control over like some kind of filtering or EQ and a little bit of control over timing, and then overall control over the general sound, like that spread is spreading it across stereo field for us, so I just want to keep that cranked. Let's play with a couple other presets here as well. You can see that these presets are organized by the type of sounds you might run through it, but obviously a lot of magic happens when you start running, say, a chords preset like we have with fragmenter over drums. I think that's pretty cool. Let's use a preset called 3 followers on these drums. Again, do you want to go extreme with these and totally transform your drums, or just dial them in a little bit? And now the drums are talking to me. That's cool. Jump to one more preset that I want to show off on this. Assembly line. Another kind of scattery kind of preset, but it's got that crushing aspect to it as well. And I'm showcasing this just on drums, but I want to reiterate again that these effects can trigger inspiration if you drop them on any kind of source. So let me go ahead and copy FLUXX here. I have a random dry vocal here. Let's listen to that real quick. Just a nothing vocal sample here. Let's drop FLUXX on here, and I want to use that fragmenter preset that we were using earlier. Let's transform these vocals. Randomizing that vocal. We're getting octaves. It's spread across the stereo field. Again, we would have to spend... Oh god, it's too cool. It's too cool. We would have to spend a ton of time doing a bunch of sound design and automation to make that happen. Finisher gives you access to transforming your sound like this in one turn of a knob. I feel like I could build up a whole track around that transformed vocal now, which previously was kind of just boring. So Neo and FLUXX are finisher titles that are designed to have a variety of types of effects, with FLUXX being sort of like the mad scientist brother to Neo. You get a little crazier stuff in FLUXX. There is another title that is designed for a specific purpose, and that is VOODOO, which is actually designed for guitar tone. So let me solo this guitar loop for a moment, turn off the finisher, bring down the finisher, and you can hear Totally just dry guitar riff here. If I use this preset on the edge. A one-stop shop for guitar here too, which is very, very cool. I don't need to go in and add my chorus, my delay, my reverb. I don't need to do any of the processing. It's all in here in one single plugin. I'll play another preset for you. That I just think is super cool. And don't forget, we started with this. And all of that beautiful sonic goodness coming from a single plugin, a one-stop shop. Notice that the very knobs here, I'll point it out again, but hopefully you've been noticing that they're changing from title to title. Here, a guitar-based title with VOODOO. We've got overdrive. We've got access to the spring reverb, which sounds quite good in my opinion, and a highlighter, which you've seen across different titles. I could get lost in that space forever. I mean, all the finisher titles are designed to basically take your basic track that you've got, it's sounding good, right? But how do you add those bells and whistles? How do you make it sound even better? What's the missing secret sauce that you need? You can probably find it in at least one of these finisher titles. Whether it's getting really great vintage sounds from retro, creating transitions with boost, or the overall variety effects that you get with Neo or the crazier version FLUXX. I'm sure you can start implementing finisher in one of your tracks today. And there's also trials for each of these titles. So give it a shot, give it a try, figure out which one is best for you. Maybe you like using different titles for different uses. I don't know. This was just some inspiration today, but give these a try. Take advantage of the free trial. I hope you've enjoyed this video. This has been Taetro for ujam. Thank you so much for watching. Let us know what you want to see next in the comments down below.